Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SourceForge podcast. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Beau Hamilton, senior editor and multimedia producer here at SourceForge, the world's most visited software comparison site where B2B software buyers compare and find business software solutions. Today, we're talking with Chapelle Ryon, CEO of WorkBright, an onboarding software platform designed to simplify and accelerate the hiring process. They focus on compliance, making compliance a breeze, working to really cut down on the hassles of paperwork and just keep the entire onboarding process smooth and easy for everyone involved. I could continue, but I want to let Chapelle explain WorkBright in her own words because I feel like I might not do it justice. So, Chapelle, welcome to the podcast. First of all, glad you can join us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Beau. I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, before we get started, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, so Chapelle Ryon, it's a hard name, so thank you for we can move that forward. I'm CEO of WorkBright, and WorkBright, as you said, you gave a good overview. I'm happy to dive more into it, but more just kind of focused here. So I'm not the original founder of WorkBright, but I have been here for 10 years. I have a real passion for efficiency in processes and in day-to-day life. So that is what we have brought to WorkBright here. I come from kind of a marketing operations background and took over as CEO 2 years to kind of help us with the scale and take this product into the marketplace in a way that's really meaningful for our customers that we're delivering to. I'm currently here in my Denver office with my 2 bulldogs. So that, I guess, is just a little background on myself.
Awesome. Yeah, that's cool. So you've been there for 10 years. You're in a space. It sounds like you're really excited about this space. And it's a space that like might not seem inherently exciting for a lot of people, but it's cool that you're excited to get in and innovate. Can you just, I'd love for you to provide an overview of WorkBright. How would you best summarize your product and why customers ultimately buy from you?
Yep. So WorkBright is in the HR tech space. We offer a solution for the distribution and collection of new hire paperwork, particularly Form I-9 is our bread and butter. So I always like to start kind of with the original founding story of the company. Our original founder is a man named David Zakunda, who's a serial entrepreneur. He has a summer camp business where they were struggling with the pain of having 10 year-round staff and then 250 staff members they needed to put at each of those camp locations within a very condensed time frame. And these individuals were oftentimes coming in from other states just for this job, maybe younger generational workforces that their birth certificate was at mom and dad's house, and just very complicated in the amount of paperwork that needed to be collected, particularly in a highly regulated industry like childcare and healthcare, where there's certification collection. And then the complexities of, if we don't have all of this nailed on the first day of work, we can't put someone to work, and then we can't run our businesses. So Dave kind of looked in the marketplace and said, the solutions that were out there at the time were really set up for that traditional day one. You come into an office and you spend your first 4 hours filling out paperwork in a dimly lit room. And he said, there has to be a better way for me to accomplish this so I can give my employees a better first day and get this all done before that first day of work. So customer funded the first solution with 4 other camps. We've now expanded much more than in the outdoor industry. There's a lot of companies that need this service of distribution and collection of new hire paperwork before the first day of work. And that is really where we focus. So we are a technology company focused in onboarding. Onboarding means a lot of things to a lot of people. We really are focused in that compliance space of the paperwork that needs to be collected, easing that pain for our HR administrators, for the employees, and lessening the compliance burden that is there for the organizations with some of these key risk factors as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So you're really focusing on the simplicity. I think that's huge because the hiring process is often one of the most archaic areas of a business, right? It kind of makes me think of maybe orientation day and the first week of school at university. Every class has you go through like the syllabus page by page, and it just burns valuable time and that could be allotted for, more teaching and learning ultimately, right? I want to ask you a little bit about the technology being utilized. What technology is WorkBright utilizing to enhance the hiring process for organizations, and how does it really set you apart from other companies competing in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So our development methodology, we kind of go through these 4 kind of criteria when we're going through it. And it is really what makes WorkBright different than some of the other solutions on the marketplace. So number one, we're talking about Form I-9 and these things that mean that someone is eligible or not to work. So number one is always going to be compliance. We work with some of the country's top attorneys to look over everything we do before we release it into the market. We even go so far as to indemnify our solution against fines that would be incurred from USCIS or any of the regulating authorities that have a stake on this part of the process. So some people think that just by working with a provider, like, hey, my payroll provider has an I-9 solution, that means that they are compliant. That is not the case. In fact, USCIS this last year, for the first time, came out with guidance for employers that are working with software providers because of this misinterpretation in the marketplace around that. So the number one thing we do is we're always looking at the compliance as a number one factor. Number two, though, a very close number two is security, right? We're talking about people's work authorization documentation, their social security numbers. We are SOC 2 Type 2 certified, and we make sure that everything we do is through a lens of how can we keep our employee data secure. It's 2024. This is a growing area, and we have seen other people in the marketplace that have had major breaches, and they're very costly for the vendors that are providing and for the organizations and needing to communicate this to employees and have to offer services around them. So compliance and security are the two things that we focus on. But I will say, I think that where other vendors are or aren't working on those, they are a little table stakes at this point. If you are working with a software vendor in this space, you should make sure that those two things are top priorities for them. What really makes WorkBright different is our 3 and 4, which is speed and throughput of that new hire paperwork and Form I-9. So on the speed side of things, what our mission is to have an under 10-minute onboarding process. And we do that through a patented piece of our technology, which is the way that we facilitate the authorized representative process. So without going too deep into Form I-9 nerdness, just to level set with you, Beau, I don't know how much you know this space. There's Section 1 that needs to be completed by the employee. And then there's Section 2, which is on the employer to complete, that verifies the work authorization that is being submitted in Section 1. Traditionally, what has to happen is that work authorization document, so the passport, the driver's license that you have there, you select from list ABC, you put that on your Section 1, then you go in on your first day and you physically review with an HR administrator that these documents are legitimate, that they are to the best of your ability associated with the individual that's there. Well, you can see how that creates a big break in the process where you're putting someone to work assuming that their Section 1 is complete, and then they come in on the first day and the driver's license was expired. So now you're back to the drawing board. Maybe you can't even hire that person. How we do it is we use what's called an authorized representative workflow. So this has been a part of I-9 for a long time. It got popularized over COVID. We actually developed it before then. We allow the employee to elect their own authorized representative. The employer can set some parameters around who that person can be. It can be a family member or not. It can be someone over a certain age. I enter the text message of that individual that I'm electing to be an authorized representative. It sends them instructions on what they're doing, how to review these documents, and then they're able to sign off on that Section 2 on behalf of the employer. So you can see how it takes that traditional process, which was a total break, right? You're waiting until your first day, or some other providers may use like a network, but you're still requiring people to need travel and scheduling requirements. There's a total break to being able to complete that whole process in under 10 minutes. So we're really speeding up the speed with which people are able to complete this paperwork. And then the last one that I said there is throughput. So we have, just on Form I-9 alone, we have over 35 guardrails in place to help make sure that not only are we completing these quickly, we're completing them compliantly and with accuracy within the process. So that means that the number of people that start your new hire paperwork process to the number of people that are ready to work on that first day, we're increasing that throughput by an average of 9 to 15 points for employers that are coming over to us just by putting in the appropriate guardrails with a UI and UX that is very accessible to our employees. So 80% of employees that complete on our platform do it via mobile phone, and everything is optimized for that workflow to be really user intuitive and easy. We try to make paperwork a joyful experience for those new employees.
Oh yeah, that's a great breakdown. And yeah, feel free to get into the nitty gritty. I'm soaking all this in because I don't know a lot about this space, so this is really interesting. Now, I imagine most of the value probably comes from companies who are juggling a lot of I-9s, right? Such as large Fortune 500 companies. Can you give me maybe an example or a case study of a client that was perhaps reticent to use you guys, but and ultimately ended up using WorkBright and your services and having great results?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say, yes, there's a ton of value, especially on that speed and throughput piece on the high end of the market in the enterprise space. And it is a big market for us. Some of our largest employers do over 500,000 per year. So we can handle that scale and we have great unique value propositions for those individuals. We also do have a lot of SMB businesses where the value proposition for them is more on this compliance piece, where maybe they don't want the burden of having to stay up with whatever new thing has come out in I-9, and we can manage that on their behalf. So the solution really is scalable to all businesses that need a partner in this I-9 space. But you're right, and you called it out, right? Like the speed and throughput value props in particular are huge wins for us. Where they're seeing a ton of value is um, in two areas. One, for the HR administrators, we have staff that are saying, even when I use my vendor, I still need to have someone on the back end checking over what's happened, if there's any fines associated. We've been able, with one customer, we were just finishing an annual review, to reduce their staff of 40 administrators that was previously that was working with their I-9s down to 12. And that's just because they saw that they were coming through so much more compliantly. The number of errors was so reduced that they weren't having to do all that track and chase on the back end to solve TNCs, to enter information into E-Verify. They were really able to reduce those down. We have other companies that come to us, like staffing is a huge vertical for us. There's a company called Allwork. And I loved their story because they had a use case where they were bringing on a new client where they were going to have to do 4,000 I-9s to convert this client over on behalf of I think it was an M&A experience. And excuse me, Allwork if that wasn't exactly why, but they were bringing on a massive client of 4,000. And we were able to cut their onboarding time per employee down by 50%. So the speed and savings that they were able to get in knowing that these things were completed, not having to track down employees and get them all the way through, is just a huge value add at the top end of that scale.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, it makes me wonder just like why wouldn't every company want to implement this, right? Especially with remote work, as a remote, fully remote worker myself. I imagine you do get some pushback when you're talking to larger companies for whatever reason. What would you say is their biggest concern typically?
Yeah. Well, look, there used to be, I think, some trepidation about this authorized representative process. I've seen COVID has had a big shift towards this. It kind of gained popularity because people needed solutions where they didn't have to go in. And as remote work has come forward, I've seen a lot of user adoption across authorized rep kind of within the industry. So we don't hear that as much, but there are still some questions about, okay, if this individual is a neighbor or friend, how do they know what they're supposed to be doing? How do I know that they're going to be reviewing this information with accuracy the way that I would as a trained HR professional? And I think that that's a valid concern. So one of the things that we released this last year to kind of help with that was document verification layered on top of our I-9 solution. So I've already talked about the guardrails we have in place to make sure that, if they're bringing in a common mistake, for example, is like someone will bring two list B docs. You can either bring one list A or a B and a C, and they'll bring two list B instead of a B and a C. So we're already putting in guardrails to make sure that they're bringing in the right things. But document verification is such a huge step forward. Now, not only are we making sure that they're presenting the right documents, we're making sure that what they've presented is actually a driver's license. We're passing this document through a series of anywhere from 10 to 22 checks, depending on the type of document, to make sure that it is valid, that it is what they said that it was, that it is unexpired if that's necessary for that document. And we're doing some new stuff like, is there potential fraud associated with this document? Has there been metadata that's been manipulated in it? So by the time it gets to the authorized representative process, it's gone through an additional scrutiny that you as the HR administrator would have had that perhaps the untrained eye doesn't have. Then we're also training that authorized representative with videos in here's what you're supposed to be looking for and putting some guardrails on what they're able to do so they can only reject an image or a work auth doc if it is one of these three things, which is legally required. So we've thought a lot about this auth rep process and tried to be really practical and put in a lot of support in that when there are questions around the way that we facilitate the auth rep. And I think that we've gotten we're able to overcome those objections at a really high rate because people believe in this process and they understand the pain of it. And then I think I mentioned this already, but we do even go so far as to indemnify our solution. So if there are concerns after that, we say like, hey, we've been through dozens, probably hundreds of audits, because I'm rarely brought in at this point. Auditors come into our solution, they're able to look up, everything gets automatically added to the audit trail, the 2 unique IP addresses, and they're able to go through that process really compliantly. So we take a good look at this author process, and I will say I think we're getting less and less pushback in the marketplace as it's becoming more commonplace. I believe in 2-3 years this will be the standard instead of the exception. I think we're already making huge headways towards that.
That's great. Yeah, that last part you mentioned about the being fully indemnified that really is a huge testament, to the faith you have in your product. It makes me think a lot of, I signing a lot of like campaign documents for YouTube and different brand sponsorships, and like there's always like not always, but a lot of times there's a clause of waiving your rights to indemnification, and it's like it kind of makes you uneasy. But the fact that you guys are fully, just fully indemnified is really a testament.
Yeah, and let me just say, just so that we're not getting confused, we're indemnifying our solution, right? Like I can't indemnify if you're just not going to review these in the 3-day period and do some of those like more practical fines. So it really is around our solution and the way that we provide it. We really do stand behind and believe should be the commonplace first choice for employers moving forward.
Gotcha. Well, now, when you're meeting with companies and the representatives, you can probably assume they're looking at other options. It's a competitive landscape nowadays. Can you describe what that process sort of looks like?
Yeah. So when we think about like the competitive landscape, we happily, when I started in this 10 years ago, when I started in the I-9 space, there was a lot of conversion from paper to a digital process. I think that's gone away. We are looking at providers in the marketplace now, and largely those are all-in-one platforms. So your standard payroll backend platform that says, hey, yeah, we can do your I-9. But really what that is a digital version of the PDF I-9, which is still very burdensome for employees to manage. And if they have partnered or looked at these solutions, some of the other I-9 specific software solutions, which there aren't many, were really built, and this is no discredit to them. I love anyone that's trying to solve this pain for customers, but they come from a lot of them are built by lawyers, and they have not as big of a UI, UX technology bent on it that's really easing it for the employee. It's very much focused on that back-end HR admin platform. And we really are the best in class provider in this area. So our mission is to be the best I-9 solution in the world. I believe that we are that. We still have maybe a year or 18 months of development work. We're always iterating on it to make it better. We're always reviewing where are people getting stuck in the process. This is why we created document verification. We said, what's the number one reason that admins are rejecting these I-9s and having to go back to the employee? Let's put in a solution to come on that. So we are focused on this area, and we're either normally selling against an all-in-one platform where it's just not built out the way that it should be, or should we build this ourselves? So there's a buy versus build conversation. And in that conversation, my answer is, look, we've been doing this for 10 years. There is a reason that you want us to be the reactive player playing in the government landscape versus you having to do it yourself. There is new regulation that comes forward on this often, and often with very little notice for when it needs to be instituted. Last year, as relaxed COVID guidelines were ending, we were given a 10-day notice for a brand new procedure that was to be put in place on there. So if you can think about like, yes, it may cost you X to build this out initially, but you really need to think about the ongoing maintenance time that you're going to have to get every time a new I-9 regulation comes out. You need to ingest it, interpret it, build against it. It is a big maintenance cost that we're able to do for our customers. So what we actually have really leaned into is our embedded solution. So we have a robust API. One of our reseller partners was trying to integrate with another provider. They were trying for 6 months, and they were able to embed our solution in 6 weeks, as opposed to the 6 months that they were trying to do with the other provider. So we want to be that partner to these companies that are out there trying to solve this pain, and can make that really seamless and easy to just say, have whatever ATS you want on the front end, have whatever you want on the back end, and slot WorkBright right in the middle. You can provision employees in easily and send information you need out to payroll on the back end as well.
Okay, that's interesting. I want to expand upon that integration you just kind of touched on at the end there. And not to toot my own horn or anything, but we've interviewed a wide range of companies for this podcast. Companies concerned with like all sorts of things, inventory management, payment systems, customer experience optimization. I mean, the list goes on. And, it seems like almost all of them stress the importance of integrating with their services with third party tools, right? That seems like a very important piece for you too, given that these companies that you work with have existing software that they don't want to part with. Can you kind of talk more about that?
Yeah. So, I talked about our open API, and I think that that's a great sell for that. We have some kind of out of the box integrations, ADP Workforce now that you could kind of click to move forward. What I think is unique about WorkBright and really well positioned is that we find that companies more and more have their own workflows that they want to create. So where those out of the box integrations are available, we can also really support with your unique workflows of how you want this process to move through. So for example, do you want to have to stop after section 1 and review that information before it goes to section 2? Our e-verify stuff comes back automatically. That's automatically integrated to e-verify. It's going to return the result. Do you want to wait for that e-verify closure before you're sending it to payroll? Organizations have different standards for what they want to do there, and we can facilitate and support our customers building out the integration that is really ideal for their workflows of the business. And we believe that that's a big win. It makes them a stickier customer that wants to work with us longer because we can really solve the pain that they need and not just check the box of saying, yes, you can create an employee in here. What do you want to send over with them? How do things need to flow for your business to work as efficiently? We really partner with our organizations to make that happen.
Now, looking ahead, it seems like there's, always new regulation or like a shift in the economy or something that impacts what companies need in technology. How do you ensure WorkBright adapts to those changing needs?
Yeah. Okay, so you're asking like when I'm looking ahead at the next couple of years, what am I seeing in the marketplace and how are we adapting to it?
Yeah, I mean, my next question is actually going to be talking more about the emerging trends. I want to kind
Oh,
of drill
gotcha.
into the technology at play. Yeah, what do you see?
Yeah.
What do you see shifting?
Yeah, so we work with a couple of the country's top attorneys to kind of like check over everything we do before we release it. So we have a network of individuals and feeds that are coming into myself and our product team all the time. There's some interesting stuff happening in Illinois right now with E-Verify, for example. So we bring that information in. We really have institutionalized that like there is a portion of what we do that is going to be reactive to the regulatory changes that are going to come at us, again, with very little warning. So we are taking that information in. We're always pivoting and adjusting to what's happening in the marketplace to really make sure that we're on the right side of the compliance piece of things. There's going to be shifts. I'm happy to talk about some of those emerging trends that we're seeing as potentially disruptive to the marketplace and to what we're doing and how we're thinking about how we will accommodate those.
Yeah, you mentioned the Illinois. Is that in regards to like facial recognition, privacy standpoint, or?
No, no, biometrics is a hot topic that we are monitoring as well. Our document verification, we actually are not processing any biometric data for that reason because that's a hot topic in there. We'll be monitoring and seeing how we can bring in. I think there's a lot of value that the product could have from adding those in, but we are trying to stay on the right side of that conversation for now. Yeah, so more what I say with Illinois is they have put some state regulatory pieces on top of the federal mandates for E-Verify. So we have to then incorporate those into our products because we have a lot of employers in that Illinois region. So they need to say like, how is WorkBright supporting me with these changes that my state has just come and layered on top of the federal mandates for E-Verify?
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for kind of expanding on that. I'm curious because I've been following kind of the AI privacy standpoint for over the last handful of years. And I know Illinois has really kind of been a staple there. I'd love to dive kind of more into maybe the biometrics and just the emerging trends. What emerging trends are you currently following?
Yeah, so when we think about fraud, 63% of rejected documents through some of these like providers that come out with these stats last year were due to document image fraud. So I think like the rise of AI that's coming forward, the ability to create what could be fake biometrics, fake documents around here, it's incredible. We just did a big webinar with our council of how these tools can be used to create fake work authorization documents. So we created this document verification to catch some of those, but I think this is going to be a rising issue for employers in future years is how do I know that this is or is not a valid work authorization document? And you really need to be partnering with someone that's thinking ahead in this space to help you tackle that issue. And that's also because current administration that's coming in right now, we are seeing a big push towards E-Verify. So right now, E-Verify is mandated in 17-ish states. Depends what you mean by mandated. It's mandated for some employers and not others in some states. So there's kind of an edge case there. But it is a big initiative for this current administration, and we're expecting to see a big rise in the future, in the next 4 years, of states that go online with E-Verify. And Beau, I don't know how much you know about E-Verify. I'll just say incredibly cumbersome for HR administrators to need to take the data that is on Form I-9 and re-enter that information into the E-Verify system to return a result for them. You can imagine kind of like fat fingering just the time that it takes to translate that information. The way that we do it is when Section 2 gets signed off, we're automatically sending that information to E-Verify from the documents that were originally created. And then we're returning those results directly in the WorkBright platform as well. So a good example is a TNC. That's a tentative non-confirmation. If something comes back and there's unconfirmed data and it turns into a TNC, we are facilitating that. We're bringing it back. We're notifying the admin that there's a TNC that needs action. And we're also notifying the employee on behalf of the administrator that there's been an issue with their employment authorization and they need to take action on that or choose to not take action. So we're really easing that burden for them. And as more states come on and are mandated to do these E-Verify standards, they're going to need solution providers to partner with them, A, to understand it, and B, to facilitate it, because it's very burdensome.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. There's a lot to respond to there. I think the stats you mentioned early on was crazy. The presidential election absolutely has some uncertainty around it. And I think you're absolutely right about the artificial intelligence and what the maybe nefarious impact that will have. I think of it democratizes a lot of powerful AI software and features that I think will open up a lot of, great avenues for opportunity and growth and innovation, but it will also open up, increase fraud and increase ability for people, the average person, to make fraudulent documents and engage in identity fraud. How is WorkBright really preparing to handle these shifts? I know you touched on some of them, but how are you preparing to handle these shifts that will really impact hiring in the US?
Yeah. So yes, I've talked about document verification quite a bit. So I'll leave that one and say, like, that is the biggest answer to that. And we have just released version 1 of that. We have planned a version 1.5 and a version 2 of like expanding these, maybe going more into the biometric side of things, but we have some interesting regulatory environments that we need to navigate around that. I think that we're also planning to introduce some biometric where we could verify that the individual on the other side is different than the person that is submitting the documents. So just really using and leveraging some of these changes to strengthen the processes that we have today. But I'll say, like, this technology and this thing that we're talking about doesn't just apply to Form I-9. We also offer mandated state tax forms. We can handle everyone's custom forms. There's verification of credentialing when we talk about home healthcare being a huge industry for us as well. So we're planning on bringing in a lot of these trends that we're seeing in the hiring landscape to help increase the flow through that you're able to get, that speed and throughput that I talked about here at the beginning. There's a lot of ways that technology can support these providers in easing and moving through all of those regulatory changes that are coming forward.
Yeah, that's great. You're aware of these concerning trends, and you're actively working to really handle them, mitigate them, and innovate in this sector. I have got one more question, one more meaty, substantive question for you. I know all leaders, they want to have the opportunity to tell potential customers one big thing, kind of like, shouting it from the rooftop, or if prospects only knew this one thing. What would that one big thing be for you?
Yes, that one big thing would be, there is no reason that this in 2024 should be a big pain for your administrative staff. Remote onboarding, completing this stuff before your first day of work, is the way of the future, and it is completely enabled by technology. So, of course, we'd love to be that partner, but get this into your workflow, and it will free up your HR people to do what they love to do, which is working with people and not the paperwork. And let us take the burden of regulating and distributing and collecting all of this stuff for you, because there are such bigger, more important things for these HR professionals to be doing with their time than focusing on these very nuanced compliance regulatory pieces of their overall workload.
That's great. Yeah, remote onboarding is the future. I think that's a great note to end on. Now, for those interested in learning more about WorkBright, where would you send them? Where would you send listeners? How can they get in touch with your team? Where's the best place to go?
Yeah, our website is a great place to start. So bright, BRIGHT.com. I think it'll also be linked in the show notes, Beau. Am I correct on that? Um, and if you want to learn more about our solutions, contact our demo team. You can contact us at info@workbright.com. We'd love to give you an overview of what it is that we can facilitate on your behalf, and especially talk about your custom workflows and how we can slot this right in so that we can take this pain off of your administrative team.
Awesome. All right. Well, workbright.com, that's a great place to start. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to sit down and talk with us about WorkBright. I really appreciate it, Chapelle.
Yeah, thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it, Beau.
All right. Thank you all for listening to the SourceForge podcast. I'm your host, Beau Hamilton. Make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all of our upcoming B2B software related podcasts. I will talk to you in the next one.